Haas F1. They joined the sport in 2016 trying to prove that new teams could achieve greatness in F1. And within 3 seasons, they were fighting for 4th in the championship, with Renault scoring 93 points in 1 season. But after 2 disappointing seasons, they dropped both their drivers for an up-and-coming driver and, well, Nikita Mazepin. But this failed and they brought back Magnussen in 2022 and experienced driver Nico Hulkenberg in 2023. They are 8th in the Constructors with only 11 points and, as we speak, most people would say is the worst car on race pace. So the real question is, what has happened to Haas F1? So I'm going to start off with the 2 main controversies that Haas have had. And their first controversy was, of course, Rich Energy in 2019. Without a doubt, this heavily impacted their reputation, as Rich Energy was their main sponsor. They changed to the black and gold livery, which I still will admit looked very good. But Haas were promised a lot of money and a lot of backing, but they never received the money, and no one really knew what Rich Energy made, as apparently they made an energy drink, but no one had ever seen it, and no one knew where they were getting their money from. And so, with all of this said and done, Haas broke ties with Rich Energy in September of 2019, as it just wasn't working out between the two. Now, the next controversy, which really damaged Haas's reputation, was of course Nikita Mazepin. Now, I won't get into detail what Mazepin has done which caused the controversy, but basically he is just not a very good man. And if you want to have a look at what he's done, and if you don't know, head over to BBC or any news article, and there's plenty of news articles about what he has done. But never mind the bad reputation that this man has, and this man brought to the team. Not only this, but he just wasn't a very good driver as well. He spun and crashed out in his first race. He constantly was getting DNFs throughout the season, costing the team a lot of money. And yes, he was a paid driver, but the team scored 0 points with Mazepin in that car, and no one in the sport liked that Mazepin had that seat in Haas. So, from 2019 to 2021, Haas had really taken a massive hit to their reputation, and obviously that reduces the amount of sponsors they get, that reduces how many drivers want to go to them, and all in all, just reduces how well they can do in the sport, means less money. So I'll then head on to the best and worst season Haas have had. And by far, the best season Haas had was in 2018, with their starting lineup of Grosjean and Magnussen. And funnily enough for Grosjean, this season started very poorly, with him only managing to score his first points in his 9th race in Austria. But it was the best weekend Haas have ever had in F1, coming 4th and 5th. Grosjean 4th and Magnussen 5th. Grosjean then managed 6th in Germany, 7th in Italy, 8th in Japan and Brazil, and 9th in Spain, finishing his season off with 37 points. And again for Kevin Magnussen, his teammate, he had an even better season, scoring 56 points overall, with his best result being 5th in Bahrain and Austria, 6th in Spain and France, and 5 more points paying positions in the season overall. So Haas were looking good, as every season had been going up and up in the Constructors, but then obviously that's when they had the 2019 Rich Energy controversy, and the team just completely dropped back down to where it was in the first season or 2, and then it's never really been able to bounce back. And by far the worst season for Haas was 2021. Like I said, Mazepin lined up in that Haas with Schumacher as his teammate, and Mazepin only managed 14th as his best race position in the season, with Schumacher only managing 12th as his best as well, meaning Haas, for the first time in their history being in the sport since 2016, did not score a single point in the season. So with all this said and done, let's have a look at their season so far in 2023. Now, they started off okay, with Magnussen getting 10th in Saudi Arabia and 10th in Miami, and Hulkenberg managed 7th in that very hectic Australian Grand Prix. But since Miami, they've only really managed to score 3 points, and that wasn't actually technically real race. It was in the Austrian sprint where Hulkenberg did amazing in qualifying, and then because it wasn't a long race, and we all know about Haas's race pace, because it wasn't a long race, he was just able to hang on to 5th position, scoring 3 points in that sprint shootout. But Of course, in the Austrian race, he then fell off. Of course, he DNF'd, but it didn't look like he was going to get any points before that anyway. And like I said, it really is a shame for Haas because they are amazing in qualifying. It's just their car is so hard on the tyres and their reliability is terrible. I'll give you some examples of where they've qualified very good and just fallen completely off the pace. So Magnussen in Miami qualified 4th and could only manage 10th. 8th for Hulkenberg in Spain qualifying, but then 15th in the race. 2nd in Canada qualifying for Hulkenberg. Again, pinch of salt because he did have a penalty which then dropped him down to 5th. But even still, he started the race 5th and ended the race in 15th. Not what you'd expect from a car that can qualify 2nd. And then, most recently, he qualified for the actual race in Austria 8th and DNF'd. Of course, before that, he had been swamped by the rest of the field as well. So, realistically, going on to my next point, Haas really need to bring in upgrades. Now, someone in the comments can tell me down below if I'm wrong about this, because when I was doing my research, I could only find upgrades up to the Monaco Grand Prix for Haas. So, if they have had upgrades since then, can someone tell me please? And I don't think the car's changed since then. And you can see, because even their qualifying pace is a little bit off in the last few races, they are going to get swamped by the rest of the grid if they don't bring upgrades in. Purely because McLaren, they had a terrible start to the season and Haas were actually better than them at the start. And look where McLaren is now and look where Haas is. Again, Alpines are bringing upgrades in, moving them further up the grid. AlphaTauri have just brought major upgrades for Hungary, meaning they might swamp Haas as well. So realistically, Alfa Romeo and Haas are the only ones that are the backmarkers technically if the AlphaTauri upgrades don't work. So they really need to bring upgrades before their car gets swamped by the rest of the field. And I think finally, I briefly want to talk about their funding. As we all know, Haas doesn't actually have a lot of funding compared to other teams. I would say technically they're a small team. All over the news, there's always been talks about how small the Haas team is. And you've really got to think, if Haas can only manage to afford a small team, which is nothing compared to the likes of a Mercedes or a Ferrari, then realistically in F1, which is a very big money game, even with the cost cap, they're gonna struggle. So realistically, they need to put more funding into the sport, or sadly, they need to back out, because I can't see them making money from the sport at the minute. Maybe Gene Haas just wants to be in the sport, that's why he's carrying on, but a lot of funding required. But hey, that's all for today. Comment down below what you think about Haas. Will they improve later on in the season? Will they improve next season? Or will they just keep getting worse and worse until they are like Williams a few years ago? Or should I say, until they're like themselves a few years ago? So hey, love you all, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.